You're listening to Simply the Best Sports Take, the best podcast breaking down the best stuff in sports with host Sean Bingham. His takes are so good, he dropped the mic, but then you wouldn't be able to hear him, and that would suck.
Welcome into STB Sports Take. I am your host, Sean Bingham, and today we are talking about Jimmer Fredette. I mean, this is a guy, the most polarizing NBA D-League player that we've ever seen. In fact, he's probably the only D-League player that most guys can even name by name. But we're going to really break down Jimmer Fredette's career and what might be in store for his future. But we're not doing it alone. We are bringing in some experts. We got the voice of the Utah Jazz, Craig Bolerjack, with us. And we've also got BYU Sports Nation host Spencer Linton, who'll be joining us later as well. So, Jimmer Fredette, does he have a place in the NBA? What's holding him back? What's going on? I mean, this is a guy who broke onto the scene his junior year. He was able to beat Florida in the NCAA tournament, take BYU to the second round, which was a rarity back then. And he was averaging, 22, 23 a game. But then his senior year was unprecedented. I mean, it was the nation's never seen anything like Jimmer in his senior year, averaging 29 points a game. He played 36 minutes. He only was sitting out for 4 minutes a game, 29 points a game, shooting 45% from the field, 40% from three. And it wasn't just threes. These are like threes against double and triple teams. These are threes from 10 feet behind the line, off the dribble. I mean, unbelievable skill. Gets drafted into the league, drafted 10th overall by the Sacramento Kings, and it just didn't work out. He just seems to have not been able to find a place for himself in the league. He's been on several different teams and ends up going to the D-League. Well, in the D-League, he dominates just like he did in college, gets his confidence back, gets that swagger back, shows his range, shows his skills, and now he's got a chance with the Knicks. Is it going to work out? I don't know. If it doesn't, it's like, it makes you wonder, why does the D-League exist? You know, if a guy can dominate in college and dominate in the D-League, but he doesn't have a place in the NBA, what's the D-League even for? So, I mean, looking back now on Jimmer's NBA stats, not his D-League stats, but his NBA stats, he's been given just 13 minutes a game, but with those 13 minutes, he's turned it into 6 points, 1.4 assists, a rebound. Hasn't shot as well, but still pretty decently. 38% from three, 41% from the field, 88% from the line. But what's interesting is that Jimmer is a guy who needs the ball in his hands a lot. At BYU, he had a light so green that, I mean, everybody could see it. It was the greenest light in the history of basketball. He could shoot from wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and everybody in the stadium loved it, including Coach Rose. That's not the case in the NBA, and it probably never will be the case in the NBA. Steph Curry has that type of green light, but Jimmer's not Steph Curry. Sorry, BYU fans. It hurts me too. But so the question is, could Jimmer get starter minutes? If he could get starter minutes, his per 36 stats, so assuming there's per 48 and there's per 36, per 36 is what I prefer to go off of because nobody really plays the full 48 minutes, but they do play 36. If Jimmer was getting 36 minutes a game, his per 36 stats would be 16.2 points, 3.7 assists, 2.7 rebounds. I mean, those are, and I actually would argue that his points would be higher because his field goal percentage would increase because he's a rhythm guy. He's a confidence guy. When his rhythm gets going and his confidence gets high, he's pretty hard to stop offensively. So then you go look at the defensive side of the ball. Is this what's holding him back? This is what we always hear. I mean, we know he had Jackson Emery in the backcourt helping him at BYU. The all-time steals leader Jackson Emery was able to they got in that 2-3 zone, and he could make anybody look good up there defensively because he was that good at defense. And maybe Jimmer was resting a little bit because he had to carry such a huge load offensively. I don't really know, but I do know that he gets a lot of criticism for his defense. So you think of him guarding guys like the Westbrooks and the Chris Pauls and the Damian Lillards and even John Wall. It's like, I don't really see that going so well for Jimmer, D'ing up those guys one-on-one. And then if he's a two guard, which you could argue is more of a natural two, even though he'd be undersized, there's the problem defensively. Is he going to be able to guard Dwayne Wade's and James Harden's? I don't think he'd be able to guard those guys either. But aren't there plenty of scorers in the league that don't play a ton of defense? Aren't there a lot of guys like James Harden, for instance, who don't really D up? Is Steph Curry a phenomenal defender? I mean, I know the Warriors are great defensively, but are they each individually great, or are they collectively as a team great? Is there a system, is there a defensive scheme that Jimmer could fit in to where they could use his offensive skill sets and then have him not be a liability defensively. Because that's really all he'd need to be, is just not be a liability. So to help us dive deeper into this, we're going to bring someone else in. And that someone is an expert, the voice of the Utah Jazz, and a broadcaster that I've looked up to for years, Craig Bolerjack. Bowler, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Sean. Good to be here.
Awesome. So we're talking Jimmer Fredette here. You know as much about basketball as anybody I know, particularly basketball in Utah. Talk about Jimmer. Does he have a place in the NBA?
Well, that's probably the question that's been asked, Sean, more than once. I mean, there's been multiple discussions about Jimmer and if whether or not he belongs, in the NBA or overseas. And a lot of teams I think have been intrigued with his play and have given him multiple opportunities, to show what he can do. Again, system is very important, as you know, whether a player can be successful or not. And I'm not sure if he's found the right system yet. Obviously, his play in the DLeague has been pretty exciting and exceptional. He's the MVP of the DLeague AllStar game, and he's got all the ability to score. And the biggest, issue that all those who call themselves, experts in this game, it's about defense. And what Dave Rose was able to do at BYU was pretty much hide those, defensive deficiencies because he was such an offensive threat, and teams, were in awe of what he could do for such long range. I've never seen a college player with such long range ability, which made you think it would set him up to be a perfect NBA player from beyond the 3-point line. But sadly, as you know, I mean, this league is about defense as well, and I think it's becoming even more so. And I think Quinn Snyder and the Jazz are a pretty good example of exactly that.
Yeah. So what aspects specifically of his defense do you see? Because it feels like to me there's a lot of scorers and shooters in the league that aren't that great at defense, right? So what is it specifically about Jimmer that hurts him so bad?
Well, I think what you're seeing at point guard play, whether or not he's a point guard or a two, he's a shooter first. And a lot of times when you're a point guard, you're a distributor, as you know. And so, where does he stand in that mix of guards? I know talking to Quinn, point guards are starting. The need is they need bigger, longer, and taller guards, point guards, and Dante Exum would probably be the best example of that at 6'6". And so when you're taking on the likes of the Westbrooks and the Damian Lillards of the league, especially in the Western Conference, John, there has to be a combo of both height, length, and speed. I think Jimmer probably lacks the combination of that length that you have to have and the ability of speed. Now he's an athlete, let's be honest.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, he can get lost in the shuffle on the defensive end, especially against stronger, little bigger guards. So, if a team needs a specialty player, then Jimmer's your guy if you can afford that. But I think a lot of times, again, when I talk to coaches around the league, the San Antonio Spurs, let's just bring them up for a moment. Matt Bonner, the Red Rocket, he rarely gets off the bench, but when he does, he performs. And he's a three-point specialist, much like Jimmer. But the bottom line is very few teams have that luxury to have that type of player as their 12th guy who can accept that role. That's a very important thought, to accept the role they're in and then be ready and prepared to perform and execute when they're called upon. And so my point is, I think the league has definitely gotten away from just, okay, you're a three-point shooter, great, we'll hide you on the defensive side. Those days have kind of come and gone. And I think, again, the Jazz are a pretty good example of combo guards that can play multiple positions, both the one and the two. And I think Jimmer's kind of sandwiched out of that definition.
Yeah.
But then again, if a team would need a guy, and again, teams I think still go out and search for that type of player, and he's gotten those opportunities. It's just going to have to be, Sean, the right situation at the right time for him to stick.
Yeah. So let me ask you this then. Could things have been different for Jimmer if he had been drafted by a different team? It seems like the situation in Sacramento just kind of put him down the wrong path, and he's never been able to recover since. I mean, you talk about system. I look at a guy like Kawhi Leonard, who was in the same draft as Jimmer. They went head-to-head in college a bunch. He gets taken by the Spurs, and now he's an All-Star, Finals MVP, Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, how different could things have been, do you think, for Jimmer had he started in a different, in a different organization?
You know what? That's a pretty good question, and I think I think what hurt him was the expectations, honestly, of being a number 1 round draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
What was he, number 7?
He was 10th, I believe, actually.
Number,
10th.
So he was a top 10.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens there is automatically expectations from not only, NBA executives and around the league, but the fan base in Sacramento expects, obviously, this guy just to take them to the next level. And those are real situations, I think, for all those lottery pick players. That the expectations are you're going to immediately help this team and rise to the top. Every player, I think, that comes into this league now, especially if you're a one-and-out guy at 19, Jimmer obviously had age on his side and more maturity. But you need time. You need time to grow in this league and understand, what you are, who you are, and what you can and cannot do. And I think teams, find that out, and down the road they have expectations of what you are, and if you don't live up to those expectations, and then obviously you're saddled and put in the back chair, and then you have no way of growing. And a lot of times, like Sheldon Mack, I think for the Jazz now,
mm-hmm.
he was a third guard in Atlanta, couldn't get off the bench. With Budenholzer, and all of a sudden, given the opportunity in a consistent basis. Now it's only a 2-game sample size. You say, wow, why didn't this guy play? And again, it goes back to Jimmer getting that opportunity. And people say he has been given it, but I don't know if he's been given that opportunity on a consistent basis.
No, and
but you get into a rhythm. It's really difficult to really judge whether or not he's a bust in this league or not.
No, I completely agree there. So that was actually my next question. It feels like to me he hasn't gotten that consistent chance. I'm wondering what his ceiling is, because we looked at him. I've followed him for years throughout his BYU career, and I've been following his NBA and D-League career. And I mean, the guy was averaging 29 a game his senior year at BYU, shooting lights out. I mean, ESPN was doing Jimmer range, highlights during the, for NBA players, and even in the D-League, he's dominating the D-League. What's his ceiling if he's given the right opportunity on a consistent basis in the correct role? I mean, he was on the college level, he was kind of Steph Curry-esque. I realize, NBA is a different game entirely, but
right.
But I mean, even a guy like Kawhi Leonard, who was Defensive Player of the Year last year, when he was in college at San Diego State, he was asked. San Diego State played. I don't know if you remember this, but San Diego State played UConn in the NCAA tournament,
right?
And and that was Kemba Walker, Jimmer. They were like the 2 main guards that year. And Kawhi Leonard was asked, who would you rather guard? Who's the tougher matchup for you, Kemba Walker or Jimmer Fredette? And without hesitation, Kawhi said Jimmer for sure. He's the toughest guy I've ever guarded in my life,
Isn't that interesting?
And now this is the guy it's like this guy now is supposedly the best defender in the league, right? And so I just wonder, is there really not a place for Jimmer to really become an all-star, or is that just high hopes from people in Utah or people that are fans of Jimmer Fredette?
Well, I think it's a lot of fans from Utah and that see him in a different light than the rest of the executives or league execs in the NBA. For whatever reason, again, it goes back to the speed, lateral speed, and again, I've only seen him several. I'm thinking maybe a half a dozen times as a pro. And let's be honest, the jump from college to the professional level is pretty dramatic.
Oh yeah.
And every one of these athletes are very special, and that's why they're paid extraordinary amount of money to play and entertain. The crowds that we have in this league.
Yeah.
And I'd say I think that this topic, especially in Utah, is one that bothers a lot of people because what they saw in college, they can't understand why he can't duplicate that in the NBA. Now, there's a lot of analytics that go with this, and there's a lot of things with body size, again, speed, lateral movement, defensive up in the body, length of arms. There's so much that goes into an NBA basketball player nowadays, and I think all those things we were discussing are a part of Jimmer's probably issue. I think as an athlete, he's an athlete, and one of the most pure shooters that ever came out of college. But you know what? What's amazing is I have to kind of do a correlation between Heisman Trophy winners and maybe a little bit here at Jimmer. There's great college players, Sean, but they just don't turn out to be great NFL or NBA players.
Yeah, that's very true.
Again, they fit the system in college, and they do dominate the lesser talent. But when they get to that next level of talent, they just find out they don't have the entire package. And that's why this league turns over so often.
Yeah.
You know, the National Football League is if you last 3.5 years, that's pretty much the norm. The NBA is about 5.
Okay.
Because you have more teams that give you an opportunity to move around, and you can you can try to sell your wares there. But Jimmer's been given opportunity, but it seems like, again, only my opinion, when he's played, it's spot minutes. And every player I've always talked to is that to find rhythm, to find that mental confidence, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, spot minutes, it's difficult to ever find the true you. And I think Trey Lyles found who he was. Let's go back and use him as an example. The rookie out of Kentucky. When Favors and Gobert went down, he had the ability to start 29 games, and you started to see him get into a flow and rhythm of confidence. And now, since those two are back, he's been saddled to put back on the bench. And now I see him a little bit more meek and mild, and he doesn't really know his role now because Gobert and Favors are back. I think Jimmer falls into that same category. When you were given an opportunity and you failed, had some turnovers, and they bench you or put you back as a second or third rotation guard, and you've got to automatically come out and be on fire for those 6 to 8 minutes of rotation minutes you get. And you know what? It's about confidence too, Sean. And I think probably he was hit. And again, I haven't talked to Jimmer about this, but the bottom line is confidence is such a key. And Jack Nicklaus says this so eloquently, but confidence, it takes years to build and just a moment to lose.
Yep.
And I think that kind of comes into play here. Jimmer was top of the world in the NBA, and I think he still finds in his mind a troubling question: what happened?
Yeah.
And I don't know if we'll ever really find the answer, to be honest. I think if you break it down with numbers, then you can probably decide that he just doesn't add up size-wise. But at the same time, you can also argue that Isaiah Thomas is 5'9", and he's doing pretty well in this league. But he may, the bottom line is that Jimmer may be sandwiched between a one guard and a two, point guard and a shooting guard. And I just don't know if the team has the ability to really decide where they're going to put him.
Where do you think he's the better fit, one or a two?
I think he's a pure shooting guard.
Yeah.
I just don't think that he has that speed, agility, the ability to penetrate the paint and dish. And I think he wants to stand outside and just help a team knock down threes and be a scorer, whether it's inside the three-point line or outside. That the guy has been a dead eye from young age and to the comment until today. So I think again, those two guards are 6'8" or 6'6", like a Rodney Hood, and Jimmer just doesn't have that size to compete on the defensive end. And I think, bottom line, that's where it comes down to. If you can use him in spot situations, perfect. But again, a lot of teams don't have the ability to carry a player and pay him what he expects. If he had been a second-round pick, Sean, this may be a whole different story.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
but being a first-rounder and the expectations that ride with that, it puts added pressure on both him and the organization.
Totally. Yeah, and it makes you, I can't really envision Jimmer D'ing up a guy like D Wade even. And D Wade's, 6'4", But
and look at the body Wade has too. 6'4", fast, low built, just a burly guy. And I think, again, that's where we've seen a few matchups. You're spot on. I think that's probably the best example of putting those two together head to head, and this coach going, how am I going to make this work or hide him? When this league, really, you have to be a defensive player as well. If you're not, you don't last long, and Quinn Snyder would echo that as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we've seen guys do this before. There was Adam Morrison out of Gonzaga, similar situation, led the country in scoring in college, and then just couldn't make the leap to the NBA. But currently Doug McDermott, he seems to be doing okay as a role player, for Chicago. But he's a lot bigger, I guess. So
yes, size is size. If we had Dennis Lindsey and Quinn Snyder on right now, I think that there's, Isaiah Thomas is just an oddity. So is Muggsy Bogues, back in the day. But yet they were in Nate Robinson, who played at Washington in college. Smaller players, more bullish attitudes, and they were able to get into the paint as well and distribute. Where I think Jimmer is more just a guy that's just a pure shooter, plain and simple.
Yeah.
And I think the best example of this conversation is if you did put him with Dwayne Wade, what would happen? And I think maybe we would get our answer right there.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So, a couple final questions about Jimmer. So, what does it say about the D-League? If a guy can dominate in college and he can dominate in the D-League, but he doesn't have a place in the NBA, what does that say about the D-League? Like, what's the purpose of the D-League? Has there ever been a guy that jumped from the D-League to the NBA and, like, really made a difference and became a stud, or is it kind of a league that's still figuring itself out?
Yeah, it's a league where it's like AAA baseball or AA, I would think, where guys have an opportunity to love the game, and they're still, and I think Jimmer's another good example here of where he's borderline between the NBA. Can he make it or can't he? And the bottom line is, I think NBA execs still want to see if he can't develop into something. So it's a developmental league for a reason, and that's why players are there who still in their own hearts have hope. And because agents and execs have said, yeah, let's give it some time, and that's what the league is for. The Jazz have used the D-League fairly well for injury situation, 10-day contracts, and there's been players who've come up who've played in the D-League. Elijah Millsap for one, and it's Chris Johnson is another one who's had some NBA experience, but has drifted back and forth, and you can say, wow, he is a borderline NBA player that can give you constant minutes and a rotation player. So I think the D League's there for a purpose. Okay. Obviously, it's a for teams that are involved with those teams. If someone's injured, it's a guy that you can call up on a 10-day, fills the gap, and then back they go. It's like minor league baseball. You call up a guy, and then back down he goes for development. Yeah. So it's Jimmer can be there if he wants, I'm sure, for a long time. But at the same time, I've thought he could be a pretty popular player overseas. Yeah. And I'm surprised he hasn't taken that route yet, because there's some money to be made over there as well.
Yeah, I've thought the same thing. I think it makes you wonder if he's not on a roster to start next season or even to end of this season, will he finally make that leap to Europe? So last question.
It's like Tebow. Sooner or later, you have to realize who you are and what the situation you're in. Yep. And Tebow was, I'm a believer. We're talking football, but I'm just a believer the guy ought to change his mind and go from quarterback to try to be an H-back or a tight end. I think the guy's an incredible athlete. Oh yeah. With the mentality to love the game, and for some reason though he wants to be a quarterback in the National Football League, and this Jimmer and Tebow are very similar. You look, they really are actually. Why can't it happen? And those who again make those decisions, the release, the time it takes for him to throw, decision making, but yet he's a Heisman winner, but he can't make it in the National Football League.
Yeah, national champion, Heisman winner, but can't translate.
Yeah, really interesting.
All right, last question. I got to ask it. Why have the Jazz never gone after Jimmer Fredette? I mean, if nothing else, they're going to sell tickets, sell jerseys. Yeah. It fills a roster spot.
You know what? I've been asked that, Sean, question a lot, and I tell you, I don't know the exact answer, but my personal feeling is this. If you do make it, it's quite a splash off the top. I'm with you. It becomes almost maybe a sideshow where you go, come see Jimmer, come see Jimmer. Yeah, the tickets are sold. But if and when this time comes where other teams have to make a move and Jimmer is moved out, then the Jazz, the local team, becomes the bad guy. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of movement in this league with players, and they are used as pieces in trying to make a championship caliber ball club. And Jimmer could be, a lot of teams would fit him in to the middle or tail end of a 3-team trade. Okay. Just thinking out loud, right? Yeah. So if by chance they would bring him in, they've got to be sure that he fits the system. And
Yep.
we go back to that. Seems to be the common thread of this conversation is the system. If they try him out and he doesn't fit the system, then they have to move him. And then that can cause, obviously, some uproar within, the fan base, whether you're a Utah fan or a BYU fan or a Weber State fan. Can you imagine if the Jazz had Damian Lillard from Weber State? The guy would own the state right now, right?
Yep.
And I think that's something that you have to be really careful about. Hafa Arugio, who came over from BYU after he was traded, or he was picked up after being a high draft pick, number 7 for Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
So you always have to be careful about how this is going to work out. And I think the Jazz have just decided the system doesn't fit the Jimmer need right now. So,
and it could be too. I've often wondered, like, is Quinn Snyder thinking like, yeah, I don't want to have to deal with. We want Jimmer chants out of the crowd every game,
Right? Yeah, you're exactly right. If it's the Tebow system again, where they were chanting Tebow,
mm-hmm.
In Denver, and he got second opportunities and it didn't work out. There's fans that are always going to be Jimmer fans. I run across them all the time, and they ask the same questions: why can't this guy make it? Yeah. And if you're in the crowd and the coach has to deal with that, that puts a lot of added stress. And all of a sudden, when he makes the call, and the Jazz may be leading by 14, let's say, or 15, then he looks down the bench and goes, why not? So all of a sudden, Jimmer's in, causes Jimmer mania, and then again forces him to make some decisions that to appease the crowd, which may not be best for his team.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how things shake out for Jimmer. Craig, really appreciate you joining us.
Absolutely, and it's a great topic, and it's going to be around a while, I guarantee you.
Absolutely. Again, that's Craig Bolerjack, everybody. Bowler with some fantastic insight. And, interesting thing he noted there, he's surprised that Jimmer hasn't gone the DLeague, the European route yet. And I guess I can't argue with that because from a financial standpoint, there's no question Jimmer would be making more money in Europe than he's making in the DLeague. And from a stardom standpoint, he could really rule the world over there in Europe. But I think from a family perspective and from a career goals perspective, he's still pretty young. I think he's 25, 26. And he's got a couple of years still to try and make it happen here. It'll be interesting to see what he does at the start of next season. If he doesn't finish the season on a roster, if he doesn't start, next year on a roster, is he going to go the D-League route again? I mean, you can only do that for so long, in my opinion, but maybe he goes over and makes a bunch of money in Europe and he's a star and, he plays over there for 10 years and comes back to the States before he's got kids that are too old or anything like that. So I don't know what his real objectives are there, but I don't blame him one bit for trying to make a name for himself in the NBA because I think he belongs. So I don't think we've ever seen a more polarizing player in the D-League than Jimmer Fredette. I mean, the tweets that were coming in after he hit that first shot in his first game with the Knicks, the 3 at the end of the game, a meaningless game at that point. I mean, I was seeing tweets of people saying, yeah, I don't remember the last time I watched an entire Knicks game, but I stayed up for this one to watch Jimmer, and he didn't disappoint. And I mean, the crowd went crazy when he hit the shot, and it was like the Knicks were getting blown out, but everybody stuck around, and everybody wanted to see Jimmer in action. So people love him, or they love to hate him, but either way, they love him. The guy can shoot, and I think he's got a spot in this league, but only time will tell. And with that, we welcome in a very good friend of mine, the BYU TV play-by-play man and the host of BYU Sports Nation, Spencer Linton. Spencer, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the show.
This has been way too long for this to happen, Sean.
I know. I blame myself.
Good to be with you.
Dude, it's good to have you. So, I mean, as you know, we're talking about Jimmer. That's kind of the craze around town right now. Give us your unbiased opinion about Jimmer Fredette. Does he have a spot in the NBA?
You want my unbiased opinion? I don't know if I have that. Yeah, okay, let's start with this. I think a lot of people have gone after Kurt Rambis, the head coach of the New York Knicks, because they feel like, well, he's not giving him a shot. The tone doesn't sound good, doesn't sound favorable for Jimmer Fredette. And, so I've kind of tried to defend Kurt Rambis because it's day 2 of his 10-day contract, and he only knows so much about Jimmer Fredette, and he's only seen him in 1, maybe 2 practices. So before people make him out to be the villain, that he's just going to be the next coach in a long line of coaches that didn't really give Jimmer a shot, let the contract play out, and we'll see if he changes his tune at all. But there's the case against Jimmer is he's been in the league for 5 years, and you would think that at some point in those 5 years he did have a shot, whether it be in consistent practices or enough game time where he really caught the attention of his coach. And I know that his style is super unique, and it might not translate to most NBA teams, but for whatever reason, the shots that he has been given just haven't really translated to the 5 different teams now that he's played for, and it's unfortunate. But Gabe Rose told me earlier today that he feels strongly that if it doesn't work out in the NBA, there is absolutely a place professionally, whether it's in Europe, abroad, somewhere where Jimmer can go and absolutely torch the nets and make a ton of money. I think a lot of BYU fans and Jimmer and his family, for obvious reasons, are just hoping that he can take care of that in the NBA.
Absolutely. No. So that's my question to you. I mean, you deal with tweets and emails and phone calls all day long from BYU fans. What are you hearing from them? Are they all thinking he should be an all-star in the NBA? I mean, I know when he was coming out of college, I thought he had that type of potential. I'm not going to lie. I thought this kid could quite likely become an all-star. And I think the fact that he was drafted 10th overall says that there were some scouts that felt the same way. So do people still feel that way right now, BYU fans, or are people starting to see reality?
I think that BYU fans are holding on to the hope that he'll have an opportunity to score the basketball just like he did at BYU. But he was given free reign by Dave Rose.
Oh, yeah.
And rightfully so. I mean, he's an unbelievable scorer to just go and kind of do what he wanted to do when he wanted to do it. And he has, amazing court presence and just a feel for the game that you can't teach. And so Dave Rose kind of just let the slack out, unleashed him, and said, okay, go do your thing. And the NBA isn't that way. There are a bunch of guys that feel like they can score at will, like Jimmer Fredette. He just does it in such a dynamic way and generally from a long distance that it was like, whoa, who is this dude from Glens Falls, New York, who's shooting 28-foot three-pointers and making them at like a 50% rate during the game? It was,
seriously.
It took the nation by storm. And so I think BYU fans are hoping that just maybe a coach will unleash him a little bit for 15 or 20 minutes and say, hey, take the ball, put it in your hands, work off the high screen, and if you feel like shooting it from 28 feet, go ahead. I'm not going to pull you out of the game if you go 0 for 3 or whatever. And that just hasn't really happened. The unfortunate part for Jimmer is Paul Westphal was the coach of the Sacramento Kings when he was drafted, and he's one of those guys that you said, Sean, some scouts, some coaches that felt like Jimmer can have a scoring presence in this league. Paul Westphal is a run-and-gun guy, and he absolutely said, hey, Jimmer, let it fly, man. Go do your thing, get comfortable in the league. And then he gets fired, in the middle of Jimmer's rookie season, and it just kind of all spiraled downhill from there. And, Jimmer has never played for a coach that really would have given him that sort of leverage or freedom again. And, now people are like, well, we've got Rambis here, too, who's doing the same thing. It just, for whatever reason, the cards haven't played out for Jimmer to get what people feel like is a fair shot. But, you gotta remember, he's had a lot of practices in front of a lot of NBA eyeballs.
Oh, yeah.
And so to be fair to the situation, his critics are more than his supporters when it comes to people that actually make the decisions about who plays in the NBA.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So we all saw what he did at BYU. It was unprecedented stuff. Quite arguably the highest profile college athlete that we've seen ever. Maybe Tim Tebow's right there with him, but
Jimmer is the Tim Tebow of college basketball.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, but the offense 100% ran through Jimmer. Is it possible that actually kind of is detrimental to his game translating to the NBA? Because I don't think he has what it takes to be the star on a team, at least not a team that's going to go to the playoffs in the NBA. So is that hurting him at all, or what do you think there?
Certainly it, caused him to pause and think, okay, I got to feel my way into the NBA, and I'm dealing with a bunch of guys that feel like they should have been the National Player of the Year to some degree. Guys that are next level for sure. And so I don't know if it was detrimental as much as it's just a learning curve, because there are a lot of guys that score the basketball at a high rate in college that are just unleashed. Look at Stephen Curry at Davidson. He would have the same type of coach and mentality and backing when he was playing at Davidson in North Carolina that Jimmer had from Dave Rose at BYU, and that was, hey, we're going to go as you go, man. So but Steph kind of adapted his game to the Golden State Warriors, and he's a guy that got himself in the right situation on the right team. And can you imagine Stephen Curry playing for a team like the Spurs?
Yeah.
It doesn't really translate.
No.
They're a defensive minded, and so I'm not so sure that he would be the unbelievable superstar that he is.
That's a fantastic example, actually.
Yeah, a defensive-minded San Antonio Spurs Greg Popovich coach. And so Stephen Curry, no question, is an MVP talent, but he had to find the right situation as well. And that hasn't happened for Jimmer for whatever reason. And I know everyone goes to his defense. Like, well, he can't play consistent defense. Well, Allen Houston played for the New York Knicks, and he's the general manager of the Westchester Knicks in the D-League, and he said, Jimmer's not a great defender, but he can hold his own, and he can score at any level. And so when a guy like Allen Houston says, yeah, he can hold, he's not great, but he can hold his own. It's like, all right,
hey,
let's put him out there for 15 minutes, 20 minutes a game, and just put him out for 3 games, 15, 20 minutes, and just see what happens.
Yeah. So, I mean, you do got to admit, you think of Jimmer trying to guard a guy like Damian Lillard or Russell Westbrook or Chris Paul, and you just don't envision that going very well. So then you think, okay, maybe he could try the 2, and it's like, is he going to really D up like a Dwayne Wade or a James Harden, Like, how much did Jackson Emery help mask Jimmer's inability to defend, or how much was Dave Rose saying, look, Jimmer, we need you to score 30 a game, so you're gonna take it easy on defense? Was that happening at BYU? Did Jimmer not learn the right way to play defense, or what's all the hoopla about that?
I don't think that it's Dave Rose saying, hey, take it easy on defense. Dave had some good defenders, some good rim protectors. One of them was Brandon Davies, and I know Brandon didn't play for the last really important part of the season, but for the majority of the season he was there, and Brandon did a good job of help side defense when the man got around Jimmer, whoever it was. And he also had Noah Hartsock, who was, not huge, but his timing was impeccable. He was a great shot blocker at BYU when you look at the statistics. And so there were some rim protectors, and then Jackson Emery as well to help out on the guard line. Like, he had good, capable defenders on the floor with him at most times. And that certainly, plays into, Jimmer being able to get away with maybe some lackluster defense. And it's against college athletes. College athletes are not NBA guys. And so those disparities just become more visible when you go up a level. And Jimmer, to his credit, has worked really hard to bulk up in muscle, to become more lean, to be quicker. He's worked a ton on his agility. And now, if he can just be good enough to not get embarrassed consistently and hold his own, as Allen Houston said, then sure, why not? I mean, it's a process. He's 26, so it's not like he's old, and he's got better agility and quickness than he's ever had in his professional basketball career. And so, why not? His shot's going up quicker. His feet are getting faster. If he can be enough of a defender, let him have a shot.
No, I totally agree with that. So, I mean, my argument is I think there's a place for him in the NBA. If a guy can dominate at the college level like he did, and then dominate in the D-League like he has been, there's got to be a spot in the NBA for a guy like that. And if you look at his per 36 minutes averages in the NBA, this is in the actual NBA, not in the D-League. So, if he were to get starter-type minutes, I mean, he's looking at 16 a game, points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds. I mean, those are numbers that lots of teams would love to have out of a guy. It's just, you wonder, could he actually do that if he was ever given those minutes? And if he could, why is he not ever being given them, ever, no matter what team he goes to? Like, coaches just don't seem to see it in him like us fans do.
He needs consistent minutes, and it took him going to the D-League to rediscover what his game was and to rediscover himself.
Oh, yeah, you saw his confidence just come back to him a lot in these last couple of months.
Absolutely. When he knew in his mind, okay, I have the support and the backing, and I'm a starter, and I've played in the league for a few years, and I've practiced against elite talent for a few years, like I should dominate this game, and he does. And so just to get those consistent minutes, priceless for a guy like Jimmer, because he got the feel back. And D-League guys are kind of like, high-level college players, so guys who would have played, like against San Diego State and New Mexico, and he dominated those teams too. So just to have him getting consistent minutes is refreshing. And I think that's why, BYU fans and everybody across BYU Sports Nation got so excited about Jimmer just playing basketball again consistently and putting up big numbers. And they're hoping, just hoping that for whatever reason, he gets a shot at the next level. The Knicks have the opportunity to sign him to 2 10-day contracts. He's in number 1 right now. If they decide to kind of take a further look at him, they can extend that to a second 10-day contract. And then after that, they have to make a decision on whether or not they want to bring him up permanently for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
But hopefully he can do enough. And I know that management had a lot to do with him being signed in the first place by the Knicks because Kurt Rambis said basically that. Management had a lot to do with this, and not many coaches are that open about that.
Yeah.
So he might not be in favor of Jimmer and, the sideshow that he creates with all of his fandom and whatever right now. But if he's a guy that can come in and hit 2 or 3 3-pointers in the limited minutes that he has and they need to spread the floor, why not?
Oh,
why
absolutely.
not? The Knicks aren't going anywhere fast.
No.
They've lost 12 of 14, and I just don't see why you wouldn't just try it.
And then it had fans sticking around to the end of the game just to watch Jimmer get a shot off,
The media in New York is super brutal, and so are the fans, but they want Jimmer on the floor. And so even if it's
Absolutely.
a failed experiment, they're not going to hold Kurt Rambis accountable for playing Jimmer Fredette for 15 to 20 minutes a game.
Absolutely. So last question, then we'll let you go. Say it doesn't work out for Jimmer this year. Say the Knicks decide to not keep him through the end of the season, and he gets to the start of next season still not fully on a roster. What's the right move for him? Does he try the DLeague route again, or does he finally concede and go to Europe?
I think Jimmer believes he is an NBA player, and so because he got himself back into the NBA with the Knicks this year, I don't think that he would make the jump to Europe next year. But if he didn't get himself onto another team after a full calendar year, then I think he goes to Europe when he's 27 or 28 and absolutely dominates and plays for, a powerhouse in Spain, maybe Real Madrid or whatever, and makes a name for himself over there, makes some good money, and enjoys seeing Europe with his wife Whitney, and calls it good at age 33 or 34 with a ton of money and comes back and does whatever he wants to do. But
doesn't sound too bad to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's he's going to make money somewhere being awesome and be idolized, whether it's in Europe or in the NBA. It's just wherever he's going to get those minutes and that opportunity to go and display that. And so I'm happy that he got himself to the Knicks. That was a lifelong childhood dream of his to play for the New York Knicks. And so even if it's only for 10 days, like he suited up, he hit a 3 in Madison Square Garden as a member of the Knicks, and now he's forever a part of that organization. I know that means a lot to him.
Oh, absolutely. And for his sake and for BYU fans' sake, I hope he makes it. I think he's got a spot in the league. Spencer, thanks a ton for joining us. We really appreciate it.
You got it, man. Let's do it again soon.
Again, that's BYU Sports Nation host Spencer Linton. We want to thank him and Craig Bolerjack for coming on the show today. Jimmer Fredette, will he make it or will he not? Again, I think he will. I hope he will. But we'll just have to wait and see. That's it for today's podcast. Be sure and follow me on Twitter at Sean Bingham, SeanBingham, at Sean Bingham. And check us out online, stbsportstake.com. Please be sure and subscribe to this podcast. Share it with your friends. Tell others. It helps us out a ton. And we will be back soon with more on the NBA and the all-time greats and the list that ESPN brought out. So that's next week's episode. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm out.
Thanks for hanging with Simply the Best Sports Take. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check out stbsportstake.com. Simply the best in sports.